There are certain moments in marriage that don't announce themselves. They arrive as something small. A zipper you didn't open, a pocket you didn't pack, an object that has no business being there, sitting quietly in the dark of your bag like a held breath. I found the USB drive on a Tuesday evening in late October. I was packing my leather tote for our flight to New York the next morning. My usual routine, methodical, everything in its place. Seth always teased me about this habit, said I packed like I was preparing for a deposition. He wasn't wrong. Before law school, I was the kind of kid who color-coded her notes. Old habits don't leave, they just get quieter. The drive was wedged into the inner zipper pocket of my tote, small, matte black, no brand marking. The only thing on it was a handwritten label in blue ink, QFL Holdings. I held it for a long time. I knew what FL Holdings was. 6 months earlier, Seth had come home from work, looking hollowed out, poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon, and told me that the Florida Holdings deal had collapsed. $800,000 gone. Bad market conditions, he said. A client who pulled out at the last minute. He'd sat on the edge of our bed that night, describing it in fragments, and I had listened the way I always did. Quietly, carefully, trying not to ask too many questions. Somewhere along the way, I had learned that asking too many questions in my own marriage made me feel like I was cross-examining someone I loved. I should have asked more questions. I plugged the drive into my laptop. Password protected, of course. But I had already seen enough. The label, the name, the fact that this drive existed at all in a pocket I had not packed anything into. I set it on my nightstand, unplugged my laptop, went to the kitchen and poured water I didn't drink. From the living room, Seth's voice drifted in. He was on a call, the low, controlled tone he used when a conversation was too important to risk being overheard. I caught 3 words clearly through the half-open door. She won't know. They landed in my chest like something cold. I want to tell you, I went back to that bedroom and confronted him immediately. I didn't. I sat at the kitchen counter for 20 minutes in the dark, thinking like the attorney I used to be, before my husband persuaded me that a woman with his level of success didn't need to exhaust herself working. I thought about motive. I thought about timing. And then I thought about Quinn. Her full name is Quinn Aldridge. She's Seth's lead legal associate at the firm. 32 years old, JD from Georgetown, the kind of precision-cut professional who carries color-coded case folders and speaks in complete, uninterruptible sentences. I had met her at firm dinners, holiday events, the occasional Saturday morning when Seth needed to go over files with someone who always showed up looking like she'd just stepped out of a magazine. She called me Holly in a tone that managed to sound warm and condescending at the same time. The way someone speaks to a person they've already decided is temporary. I had never said this out loud to anyone. That kind of intuition, when you're a wife and not a colleague, sounds like jealousy. So I filed it away and moved on. That night, I photographed the USB drive with my phone, every angle, the label, close and far. Then I placed it back in my tote exactly where I had found it. I did not sleep. The next morning, Seth was already in the shower when I woke at 5. I dressed quietly, and we met Quinn at Reagan National by 7. She was already at the gate when we arrived, in a camel blazer, pulling a structured leather tote exactly like the one she brought to every client meeting. We exchanged good mornings. She smiled at me the way she always did, with her mouth, not her eyes. The flight from Washington to LaGuardia was just under an hour. Seth sat between us, Quinn reviewing documents on her iPad, Seth scrolling through his phone. I looked out the window and thought carefully about exactly what I was about to do. Our destination was Harrington Capital's headquarters, a 54-floor tower in Midtown Manhattan. Harrington ran a private equity fund that Seth had been pursuing for 8 months. The meeting today was the signing of a co-investment agreement worth $22 million. The kind of deal that makes a firm's year. The kind of deal that makes people careless. At LaGuardia, we collected our bags and walked toward the car waiting at the curb. In the organized noise of the arrivals hall, rolling luggage, announcements overhead, a toddler screaming 2 lanes over, I made my move. Quinn set her leather tote down for 30 seconds while she adjusted her coat and answered a call. 30 seconds was all I needed. I unzipped the side pocket of her bag, the slim exterior pocket on structured totes, the kind sized for a phone or a thin wallet, and slipped the USB drive inside. Not deep, just enough. Then, I zipped my own bag and walked to where Seth was already at the curb, telling the driver something about traffic on 10th Avenue. I felt very calm. The kind of calm that comes when a decision has been made so completely that there's no room left for second thoughts. Harrington Capital's lobby operates like a vault. High-security financial firms in New York run protocols that would put most federal buildings to shame. No personal devices on the trading floor. USB ports physically disabled on every workstation. Bag scanners at the lobby entrance that flag unregistered external drives as a matter of standard IT security policy. Seth had mentioned this once, offhandedly, describing Harrington as the tightest operation he'd ever worked with. I thought about that on the car ride over. Quinn's bag went through the scanner first. I watched from a few feet back. What I saw clearly was the security officer raise a hand and ask Quinn to step to the side. A second officer was called over. Quinn's structured tote was lifted from the conveyor belt and placed on an inspection table. The officer reached into the side pocket. He pulled out the USB drive. "Ma'am, is this device yours?" Quinn looked at it, then she looked at Seth. Seth was 3 feet away from her. I watched his jaw tighten, a small, controlled clench, like he was biting down on something he couldn't swallow. I don't know where that came from," Quinn said. "The label on the device, ma'am. Do you recognize the name?" She shook her head. Her hands were pressed flat against her thighs in the way people stand when they're working very hard not to shake. The officer called over a supervisor, a broad-shouldered woman in her 50s who had clearly seen everything and was moved by nothing. She read the label. She picked up the desk phone. Seth stepped forward. He said it was surely a misunderstanding, that Quinn was his firm's legal associate, that her bag contained only standard deal documentation, that if they could please just... The supervisor held up one hand. "Sir, we need to verify the device with our IT security team before anyone proceeds to the upper floors. Please wait here." Seth turned and looked at me. I was standing beside the scanner conveyor, both hands around the strap of my own tote, wearing the expression of a woman who had no idea what was happening and found it quietly, genuinely alarming. He swallowed hard. 12 minutes later, a man came down from the upper floors. His name was Knox Whitmore, a senior Harrington partner who had, before moving into private equity, spent 11 years as a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. He had been among the people expecting us in the conference room upstairs. He did not look pleased. He looked at the drive. He looked at the label. Then he said very quietly that FL Holdings was a name his firm's compliance team had flagged 4 months ago in connection with a securities complaint filed with the SEC. He looked at Seth. I will remember Seth's face in that moment for a long time. It was the face of a man watching a wall collapse that he had believed, until the very last second, was still holding. We did not sign the agreement that day. Knox was polite in the particular way that former federal prosecutors are polite when they are already deciding what to do next. He shook everyone's hands, said the meeting would need to be rescheduled pending a compliance review, and suggested team consult counsel before any further contact. In the elevator down, no one spoke. Quinn stared at the floor numbers descending. Seth stared at his own reflection in the brushed steel doors. I looked at neither of them. On the sidewalk outside, Quinn excused herself to take a call. Seth turned to me immediately, his voice dropped low. "That drive," he said. "Do you know how it got in her bag?" I looked at him with complete steadiness. "I have no idea what you're talking about." He watched me for 3 full seconds. Then he looked away. At the hotel, Seth said he needed to make calls. I said I was going to rest. The moment the room door closed behind him, I sat at the desk and opened my phone. I had 14 photographs of that USB drive. Every angle, the label. And this was the part that mattered. I had also photographed, before I transferred the drive, every file name visible on the directory screen that had partially opened on my laptop the night before it locked me out. 7 folders, wire transfers, Q Aldridge registered agent, FL Holdings LLC formation docs, client distributions, memo Seth R, secondary LLC correspondence. I texted Gideon Marsh. Gideon was my father's law school roommate, 71 years old, still practicing white-collar defense in Philadelphia. He had known me since I was 8 years old. When I passed the bar, he sent me a bottle of single malt scotch and a handwritten card that said, "The best lawyers carry their instincts like a second Skedison Sylvan." I had not called him in almost 3 years. He called back in 11 minutes. "Holly, what is it?" I told him everything. I spoke quietly, precisely, the way I used to speak in depositions. Facts first, context second, no emotion unless it was relevant. He listened without interrupting once, which told me he understood the severity faster than I wanted him to. When I finished, he said, "You photographed the directory." Before I transferred the drive. A pause. Good girl. He said it the way my father used to say it, which made my throat close for exactly 1 second before I steadied myself. Gideon, FL Holdings, I need to know what's real. Give me until tomorrow morning. He called back at 8. The short version, FL Holdings LLC had been incorporated in Delaware 18 months ago. The registered agent was Quinn Aldridge. The company had received 4 wire transfers from Seth's firm's operating account over 14 months, totaling just over $1.3 million. The failed Florida Holdings deal Seth had described to me, the $800,000 that had supposedly evaporated in a bad market, was among those transfers, dressed in enough paperwork to look like a routine client distribution. The SEC complaint had been filed anonymously by a former associate who had since left the firm. Seth had known about the complaint for 4 months. He had not told me. Then Gideon said the sentence I had been turning over in my mind since Tuesday night. Holly, that drive in your bag was not an accident. If it had been found on you, not on his associate, on you, you would have had no plausible explanation for it. You have no employment relationship with the firm. You have no reason to be carrying their deal documents. It would have looked deliberate. I sat very still. He needed a contingency, Gideon continued. Someone close enough to the firm to make the possession credible, but removed enough that the exposure didn't lead directly back to him. Someone who could absorb the first wave of scrutiny while he figured out his next move. His wife. I had spent 4 years being the woman in the background of Seth's professional life. The one who smiled at client dinners, who memorized the names of every partner's spouse, who had quietly stepped away from her own career, because her husband had gently, persistently persuaded her that it would be simpler, better, that she didn't need to carry the weight of a law practice when he was already carrying enough for both of them. And he had looked at all of that careful invisibility and seen something useful. I closed my eyes for 1 moment, then I opened them. What do I do? I asked. Gideon told me. I found Quinn in the hotel lobby the next afternoon, sitting alone near the windows with a coffee she wasn't drinking. She saw me coming and didn't try to leave. That surprised me briefly, until I understood that Quinn was smart enough to know that running looked worse. I sat across from her. I'm not here to threaten you, I said. I'm going to tell you exactly what I know, and then I'm going to let you decide what to do with the next few minutes. I told her about the photographs, the folder directory, Gideon, the wire transfers, the Delaware incorporation, the SEC complaint. I watched her face as I spoke, not to enjoy her discomfort, but because I needed to understand how much she had known and when she had known it. By the time I finished, she was looking at the table. How long? I asked. She didn't pretend not to understand. 14 months, she said. The relationship or the financial arrangement? Both. A pause. They started the same time. I let that sit. 14 months ago, Seth and I had attended his sister's wedding in Vermont. I remembered sitting next to him at the reception, dinner, thinking that something between us felt distant, but manageable. The way a draft feels before you realize it's coming through a broken window you didn't know was there. Did you know about the drive in my bag? I asked. She hesitated. The hesitation was its own answer. He told me it was just a backup copy, she said finally, in case anything happened to mine. I didn't know he planned to use it as... She stopped. As a contingency, I said. In case everything went wrong and someone needed to hold the bag. She looked away. Quinn. I waited until she met my eyes. Whatever he told you this arrangement was, you're the registered agent. Your name is on every document. If this reaches federal prosecutors, and it will, you are the one standing on the paperwork. What was left of the color in her face drained out. Get your own attorney, I said. Not one Seth recommends. Your own independent counsel. Do it today. I stood up. She said my name. I turned. I'm sorry, she said, quieter than I had ever heard her speak, stripped of every layer of the professional composure she wore like a second skin. I looked at her for a long moment. I know, I said. And then I walked away, because knowing it and accepting it as something I could make peace with were 2 entirely different things, and I wasn't ready to offer her the second one. Seth was in our room when I returned. He was sitting by the window with his jacket off, a glass of water in his hand, staring at nothing specific. He looked up when the door opened. He said my name the way he used to say it when we first met, like it meant something particular. It used to disarm me completely. This time it didn't. I sat on the edge of the bed and kept my coat on. Tell me everything, I said, not pieces, everything. He tried twice to start with context, the market, the pressure, a single client's withdrawal that had set off a chain he'd tried to contain before it became a public problem. I let him talk for about 90 seconds. Then I said, Seth, I have the folder directory from the drive. I have Gideon Marsh on speed dial. Tell me the truth right now, or we don't speak again without lawyers in the room. The mention of Gideon's name changed something in his expression. He exhaled very slowly. He told me everything. The shell company had been Quinn's original idea, a vehicle to cycle bridge capital between deals, off the firm's compliance radar, so they could move faster without triggering internal reviews. It started with a single transfer of $200,000, meant to return within 60 days. It didn't come back. Rather than unwind the structure, they used it again and again. What began as a shortcut became a system, and a system became a liability too large to ever cleanly disclose. When the SEC complaint arrived, he had spent 4 months trying to close the exposure before it triggered a formal investigation. The USB drive was a contingency plan. Something that, if things fell apart at exactly the wrong moment, would create enough confusion to buy time. A non-employee spouse carrying firm documents with no clear explanation for why. Not a crime in itself, but enough ambiguity to slow things down while he figured out his next step. He used the phrase muddy the water, about me. I sat listening with both hands folded in my lap, the way I used to sit through my most difficult client depositions. Silence, held completely still, pulls confessions out of people the way nothing else does. They need to fill it. They almost always fill it with the truth. When he finished, the room was very quiet. Were you ever going to tell me? I asked. He didn't answer immediately, which was the only answer that mattered. I am not going to be your emergency exit, I said. I'm not going to be the confused wife in the lobby while you figure out how to survive what you built. Holly. I gave up my career because you asked me to. My voice was steady. I was genuinely surprised by how steady it was. I believed that was a decision we were making together. I understand now, it was a decision you were making for yourself. Keeping me close enough to be useful and far enough from your actual work that I would never see it clearly. He didn't deny it. I've spoken to Gideon, I said. I'll cooperate fully with any federal inquiry that asks for my account of events. Whatever you decide to do from here, that's yours. But I'm not staying in the middle of this, and I'm not staying in this marriage. He closed his eyes. Get your own attorney, I said, the same words I had said to Quinn 2 hours earlier, and then I picked up my bag, walked into the bathroom, turned the shower on, and sat on the cold tile floor and let myself breathe for exactly 3 minutes. Just 3. Then I stood up, washed my face, and started thinking about what came next. What came next was slower than these stories usually sound. There was no single clean moment where everything resolved itself all at once. There were attorneys and depositions, a federal subpoena served to Seth 6 weeks after we flew home from New York. There was a divorce filing in December. There was Quinn's cooperation agreement with federal prosecutors, which meant she testified. And the record was thorough and specific, and damning in ways I had not even anticipated. Seth was indicted in February on 3 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of securities fraud. His sentencing is still pending. I reactivated my law license in January. I joined a white-collar defense firm in Washington. Not because I had any sympathy for what Seth and Quinn had done, but because I understood now, at a cellular level, how people build the architecture of those decisions. The structure of a rationalization. The way a shortcut becomes a system becomes a catastrophe you can no longer contain. That kind of understanding belongs in a courtroom, not in a quiet house where nobody is asking the right questions. My father called when he heard I was going back to practice. He didn't mention Seth. He just said, "It's about time." Then he laughed a little and I laughed too, and it was the most honest thing I had felt in a long time. He was right, of course. It was about time. The most dangerous thing a woman can do is make herself small enough to be invisible inside her own life. I did it willingly for 4 years, with what I told myself was love and accommodation and partnership. Maybe some of it was at the beginning. But love that asks you to continuously shrink yourself is not love protecting you. It is love protecting itself at your expense. I did not leave because I stopped caring. I left because I cared enough about my own life to take it back. There's no dramatic justice in this kind of ending, no public vindication, no moment where the whole room turns to look at the woman who outmaneuvered everyone. Just a person who found a small piece of hardware in a pocket she hadn't packed, thought very carefully for 30 seconds, and refused to carry what had never been hers to carry. Whatever you are holding right now that was placed there without your knowledge, set it down. You will know what to do next. You probably already do.